the Gravens and their Trinkets. Out in the distant galaxy, thousands and thousands of light years away from the Milky Way, there lies one of many unique planets the universe has to offer. A planet, twice the size of Jupiter, orbits slowly around its own yellow sun. We call these types of planets superplanets. This superplanet is filled with layers and layers of soil, mantle, rocks, boulders, and sand. It's quite noticeable looking on the outside view. Different tones of brown, giving the planet a striped pattern. However, as soon as you make your way onto this superplanet, you notice that the stripe patterns now appear to be tracks, outlines that connect to each other. The closer you view this, the more it seems to be constructed purposively. Well, you'd be right. Inside this superplanet, the layers of soil, mantle, rocks, boulders, and sand have been shaped with twists, turns, and pathways. Almost like an ant farm. Well, contain your excitement if you have a love for ants. For who created these unique paths are nothing like ants. Say, there's one now. Phew, break time. The being places down their boulder that was placed on its back with a loud thud. Behind him is a 6 foot in length and a 2 foot in width pathway he created. This is one of the many beings we will run into called the Gravens. We will call him Bob. Grub time, Bob said as he uses his hand to scoop down into the ground and pulls up a handful of soil. His hand becomes increasingly hot in temperature, causing the soil to transform into sand-like material. Bob then places the heated sand into his mouth with a satisfied smile. The Gravens are the primarily inhabitants of this planet. They have no name for their world, nor do they care to name it. They simply know it as home or our world. Their main purpose on this world of theirs is to dig and crave new pathways to find one another. Some Gravens dig in pairs, some Gravens dig by themselves. Most of the time, there will be a group of Gravens together in a cavern-like area dug out entirely they call pits. How do they do this? Well, the Gravens, unsurprisingly enough, have a special trait they acquired living on their world called body heating glow. They have the ability to increase their body heat between 500 degrees Celsius or 932 degrees Fahrenheit up to 3000 degrees Celsius or 5,432 degrees Fahrenheit. That's pretty hot for a single body, huh? You would melt instantly. Well, due to their body structure of having incredibly dense Earth skin, similar to crust on Earth, they are able to withstand intense heat and pressure. Bob himself showcases this with his appearance. Average build body with muscular arms and legs. His skin appears as if it were cracking apart. A patch of dirt-coloured hair with large brown eyes. His ears look to be merely holes on the sides of his head. So, Bob here does sport human-like traits, but it's very easy to tell he is not a human. A sudden rumble shakes the area Bob was sitting in. The dirt shifts above and below him. Out from the corner of his eye, another Graven appears. "Friendo!" shouts the new Graven that had just appeared. "Friendo!" Bob shouts back with a mouthful of sand. Ah yes, the Graven people call each other Friendo. And no, they do not humour each other with names like we do on Earth. Hang on, did you see that though? This Graven, we will call him Jim, has sugilite-coloured gemstone fingers and a violet gemstone-style mask around his mouth. You see, when the Graven go and dig using their bodies, it comes naturally to them. However, to speed things up, You know what? Let's watch. Jim points behind him. Friendos are down in the pit here. He now points behind towards the recently made hole is. You come? Bob nods before standing up to stand by his boulder. Jim dips down back into his hole while Bob begins the process. His hand heat up greatly to the point where you can see the molten, sizzling heat glow. His mouth does the same. Bob now grabs a piece of his boulder with his hands and feet, slowly transforming his heated body parts into a beautiful gemstone, similar to emeralds. Bob stares down at his sharp and emerald-coloured gemstone fingertips proudly before placing his boulder on his back like a backpack and digging down a new path towards his friendos. It takes several minutes before Bob hears the sounds of his people. The dirt and sand are pushed from his sight. He finally makes it down towards a group of Gravens, 3 more to be precise. Friendo! The other 3 Gravens cheered. There were 2 females, we will name them Dia and Amber, and 1 male, we will name him Andal. Now the females appeared similar to the males, only their hair was longer with smaller eyes. Hard head, hard head, hard head. They cheered some more. Bob had a wide smirk on his face. The pit had several larger boulders where the Gravens spar with one another for entertainment they call hard head. You want to guess what they do? Bob is preparing his spar by heading towards the large boulder and repeats the body-heating glow process, but this time it was his entire body. Bob fuses with the boulder, completely disappearing inside it, only for another second later to step out fully coated in the emerald gemstone colour. "Hard head," Bob shouts out. Jim had already done the process and emerged out of another larger boulder coated in sugilite-coloured gemstone. At the same time, both Bob and Jim collided heads over and over again while giving space every so often to pace themselves. This went on in the same manner until one of their gemstones cracked, which was Jim. The gemstone coating immediately falls to pieces, ending the spar. The Gravens howled with cheers as Bob and Jim both fist bump each other. Wow, the Gravens are truly something else. Simple-minded? Of course. What's so wrong about the simple life? Friendo! Friendo Andal shouted from behind. The group of Gravens turned to face Andal and found him doing something very unusual. We see Andal balancing his boulder on top of his head while placing his arms out to balance himself. He appeared quite silly, which the Gravens watched with smiles, everyone except Bob. When Bob watched his friendo perform something so odd, Bob couldn't help himself but to burst out laughing. He laughed and laughed and laughed. His laughter was contagious to the point his friendos joined in the laugh fest. However, something even odder was going to happen. Zee. Bob chuckles filled the pit, and his eyes began to produce tears. The Gravens, except Andal, took notice to this and stopped their own fits. They watched in awe as Bob's tears gathered off his gemstone face and down onto the floor where the water not only collected, but began to build an actual person. As soon as Bob took notice, he too stopped his fit. Andal hurries over towards his friendos to find the tear person transformed into a crystal-like being. The pit was silent. Bob stares down at the crystal-eyed person while the crystal-eyed person did the same. We will call this crystal person Ruby. Ruby smiles up at Bob while Bob pokes at her forehead. "Huh?" says Bob. "Huh?" says Ruby. "Huh?" says the Gravens. "Huh?" repeats Ruby as she turns to look over at the others. Bob rubs his head in confusion and walks towards his boulder. Ruby follows him. "Huh?" Bob says. "Huh?" Ruby repeats. Bob rubs his chin. "Friendo?" Ruby mimics him and repeats, "Friendo? What is it?" Jim asks. The Gravens were behind Ruby, looking down with very confused faces. Bob heats up the soil and hands the sand over towards Ruby. "Grub." Ruby takes the sand and eats it. "Grub." The Gravens all seem to be relieved. They all sit and eat sand together. Ruby was continuing to mimic Bob, while Bob watched Ruby cautiously. Ruby places out her hand for more sand. Bob smiles as he gives her more sand. "Trinket," he says, patting her head. "Trinket?" Andal questions. Bob nods. The Gravens welcome their new friend. The pit suddenly shakes and rumbles. 2 more Gravens appear. 1 female, we will call her Pearl, and 1 male, we will call him Helio. "Friendos!" Pearl and Helio call out. "Friendos!" the Gravens call back. "Friendos!" Ruby calls out last. Both Pearl and Helio are troubled. They blink and stare at Ruby. "What is that?" Pearl and Helio asked. "My trinket," Bob answers. Pearl and Helio join in on the grub time, but they watch Ruby, who pays them no mind. Bob suddenly has an idea. He points to Andal and points to his head. Andal happily nods. Andal then places the boulder on his head and does his goofy stance and balance. Everyone slowly builds their chuckles into laughing fits. Bob wasn't partaking this time, since he was watching Ruby, who is still eating her sand. Yo, 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 Pearl cries out. The tears form on her white gemstone face, and the same phenomenon that Bob had experienced, Pearl was now living. From her tears gathered a new crystal person. We will name him Jasper. Wow, Pearl says shockingly while placing her pearl hands on her face. Bob turns to find yet another crystal person. Bob thought. Bob taps on Ruby's head, who looks up at him, and points over towards Andal. Yes, he was still performing his goofy act. Ruby watches Andal gracefully before she too chuckles, then begins to guffaw. Tears formed around her eyes, and she too began to produce a crystal person. Jasper also chuckles upon watching Andal and forms tears of his own. Together, both Ruby and Jasper produce their own crystal. Since they were twins, we will call them Jades. Andal stops his performance to find even more crystal people here. More trinkets? Dia questioned. This really shocked the Gravens, all but Bob, whose smile formed wider on his face. Upon realization, Bob then openly began his laughing fit once more. The Gravens and the Trinkets turned towards him, wondering why he was laughing suddenly. Well, they will get it eventually, and hopefully you do too.